The Sixth Axis podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to another entry in our Year According to series of podcasts. As per usual, I am your host, Kris Lipscomb. If you haven't listened to these before, these podcasts are a look back at 2015 with various people from the gaming community, from developers and from TSA staff themselves, where we look at people's years and what they've been up to, and also talk about a few of the games they've loved this year. Today I am joined by, do you prefer James or Jimmy?
Either or. Jimmy, I guess.
Jimmy Dance, who runs Loading Bar in London, which is in Dalston, and now Stratford is your second one?
It is.
Yeah, excellent. So tell us a little bit about Loading Bar, just to get things started.
Yeah, what is it? It's that idea that everyone that sits around playing computer games with their friends has of, we should do this for a job, or like, we should open a place that has video games in a pub. So normally that idea goes away and people realise it's a stupid idea in practice, but I was dumb enough to do it and keep on doing it. So yeah, it's basically normal pub or whatever, or bar, and then it's got video games in it, and then we've got game themed cocktails. So, game influences, so in the same way you get themed bars, we've just gone for games.
I mean, that's probably a very good way of putting it, actually. I like that. Like, it's a different theme for a bar.
Yeah, which usually helps us, and that was always the model. I get, like, we've always tried to make it as inoffensive as possible. So the thing you don't want to do is give people a reason not to come in. So if there's a group of 10, on paper saying, let's go to this bar and play computer games, sounds to like, if you're not into them, that's the worst idea. But so many people then get roped in because it's still just like, oh, there happens to be a game in the corner, we'll play that. And then they go away raving about it, but it helps get away with a hard sell. So that's why we went with like Loading as a name rather than like Super Game Bar or like video games all over the title, just to give people less reasons to bail. And then once they're in, you've pretty much, second they've got a drink in their hand, they're way more amiable.
I think, I can definitely see where you're coming from with that. And you're absolutely right. You don't want to give people a reason not to come. You want to make sure that once you've got them in there, then you can convert them, as it were, bring them over to the one true side of loving games.
That's when the propaganda machine kicks in.
Exactly, that's what you want. So, what have you got in the bar in terms of games? Like, what's your general setup there?
So, over in Dalston, we've got a couple of Xbox Ones, PS4, Super Nintendo, main cabinets, pinball, table football, so a whole mix. We get asked for N64 all the time, and I keep trying to convince people what you remember it looking like is not how it plays now, and no one ever believes me. But Super Nintendo was kind of a good one that we always pick because it still looks like it holds up because it wasn't trying to be 3D or...
that's the thing, is those 2D consoles are fine, like, because they're 2D.
And, you'll watch people, we've done it now and again, we've put other stuff out like a Dreamcast, and people just, kind of speed run through the catalogue. So they put it in, turn it on, 10 seconds in, be like, right, swap that. Next second, we're like, you want to, play them, and that's what, the closer you get to, I guess, whatever you've got now, current gen, the worse that becomes. So, you give people a library, they just sit and blitz through whatever is there and don't really play anything more, I don't know, consume, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a real issue with those that generation of consoles in particular. But I think the only game I've played on the N64 that I can say genuinely holds up is F-Zero. F-Zero on the N64 actually does remarkably well hold up. But like you say, most other stuff, it's just even stuff like Mario 64 doesn't really.
Yeah, the people that usually want it are the ones that played it originally, and then they haven't played it for ages. And here's the thing, Mario Kart is great, but then you've got the Wii U one, which is I'm not going to argue which is the best, but for the experience for a user now, obviously the Wii U one is miles ahead for just it works, it's wireless pads and it looks nice. And
yeah, I mean, the other day I was, because we're doing a thing with some friends in a couple of weeks, and so I was grabbing out all my old stuff, setting it up, checking out what still worked, loaded up Halo 1 on the original Xbox. That game looks fucking terrible.
Yep.
Like, when you look at it compared to now, doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with all the re-releases. The Perfect Dark one was really well done for the Xbox, where, they mapped they solved the control. The bits you forget that didn't exist then are the bits like the good remasters seem to solve. Like, I remember it looking this good anyway. What's the difference? And then you go back and go like, whoa, okay, that did look horrific. So, it'd be interesting when, I don't know, whatever it is, 10, 15 years on, people that start on Xbox One and PS4, how they date and look. Cause it's a weird one. Kind of being 29 is about the right age that I've seen from like Atari right the way through to now. Whereas I guess some people it's gonna be odd that they just start with sort of photorealistic graphics. I don't know how that's going to evolve, or whether they just won't that much, because, there's only so much you can do.
I think the question is going to be, will we still think that they are, like you say, we are getting bored, particularly in games like NBA and stuff, where they're scanning in full players and that, and the level of detail is ridiculous. But in 10 years, are we going to be just going again, like, no, that looks terrible? Like, this is what it is now. 10 years ago, that's awful. And it's always that really interesting question. I always think about it with fashion as well.
Yep.
Because no one thinks what they're wearing now looks terrible or stupid. But in 10, 20 years, when you look at stuff, like, as a kid, you look at pictures of your parents when they were younger, and you're going, how could you have worn that? It's terrible. And are we going to be looking back in 20 years? And we probably are.
This is the thing with the new bar. Obviously, it's the first one we've kind of taken over that had like a very old school clientele, and we were joking the other weekend of there were these older guys that came in and were kind of bemused by the whole thing, but then said that, it's not for us, but we'll still get a beer, that's cool. And then we were like, what's going to happen like in 30, 40 years? That will be us.
Yeah.
And like, what would be the equivalent? So like, will it just be like projection map stuff everywhere, and we'll walk in and go like, oh, screens on the wall, that's cool, but this is rubbish. Like, it'll happen. That's just the way it goes. But it'd be interesting what our version of, kind of crazy futuristic style bar that we just don't comprehend. Like, remember the good old days when there were just like a projector and some pints. So we were trying to guess what that would be. So, or whether it's just everyone would be sat home with headsets and there will be no bar.
That's kind of what worries me, is that we're going to get to that point. With stuff like the Oculus coming along, you do get worried that it's all going to go to virtual reality video conferences and that kind of shit.
Yeah, kind of 3D print. It's interesting for what we do, that obviously VR being kind of still a bit gimmicky and expensive. Like, I can see for what we do, like, it's a really cool thing. I just, compared to what we get asked for all the time, I can, like, within the last year, maybe 9, 10 people have asked about VR. That's it. As opposed to, have you got a PS4? Have you got GTA? Have you got FIFA? Have you got blah, blah, blah. Like, it's still so low on the kind of the people we get that we just call like Joe Public. Of they don't read game magazines, they would have no idea. They don't know that whatever Xbox One doesn't play old games, and like they have no interest in it, in as much as you would think they would come in and say, like, have you got Oculus? But no, doesn't register yet, which is interesting with how much VR companies are being valued at and what they think those things are going to be.
I think the thing with VR as well is I'd be really interested to see how many people try it in that kind of social situation more than once. It's the kind of thing that I could definitely see going into the pub and like mucking about with my mates and doing it once. But I think after that you'd be like, yeah, I'll play this at home, but this isn't, because it's not social. Most VR, there are a few VR games that are, but most are like so far removed from being social, they're so isolated as experiences, that playing them in a social setting is just weird. Yeah,
I mean, just from what we see every night is see how long people can handle not being able to look at their phone. And I would say, like, asking someone, because I know the gameplay's meant to be, like the usual, the recommended gameplay time, whatever, like 40 minutes. That's still quite a long time for someone to essentially, like, just not look at anything else, because I'm all right in that I think I got a phone when I was about 13, so I remember that I can handle not looking at it for a while. But I think for people that have grown up with, second, third, fourth screens on, desktops, phones, that's going to be an interesting push. Like, you don't have any of that anymore. You have, and they can do pairing things, but it's that whole, you're still pretty isolated, and you can't really have a phone pop up when you're playing whatever it may be, like some super, like FIFA 3D. it would completely ruin it if in the top corner it says, a family member's ringing you. So I don't know how they're going to get around that, of convincing people, that's nowhere near you, or you can't look at it. And if you do, it breaks the game. So.
Yeah. I mean, I even hate, like when you're playing on the PS4 or the Xbox One, you get a little pop-up that's like your friends come online or whatever. Even that takes you out of what you're playing. So, yeah, playing in virtual reality and having the same notification pop up is going to be 100 times worse.
Yeah, I think some of them will play with it, and it'll be interesting. I don't think anyone really has a clue which one will work. Facebook has the best chance, just because, Oculus has Facebook. So, it's a very easy way. If they just want to bombard your timeline with Oculus adverts, they can get it somewhere. That's, how do you convince those public, like I said, have no idea it exists? Easy. You just embed snazzy videos in the middle of everything they check every day. But I think for anyone else, you have to spend a lot of money. And then it's convincing people that it's worth the cost of, back in the day, I got a PS2 because I did the same thing most people did. They're like, it's a DVD player. We can, the family can watch DVDs. I can play games. That's fine. And then with things like, even iPads now, you had like they're educational, and they're kind of pushed as it'll turn your child into a genius when they don't really. But that's, there's that perception it's educational, whereas VR is like, doesn't really do anything else yet. And I don't know what gimmick they're going to come up with to give you that other reason to pump in the extra £300-400 when you could just buy a tablet, or you could just buy a laptop and play the same game, but not in 3D.
Yeah, that is a real issue for them, I think. But like you say, I mean, Oculus have got a good chance with Facebook. I also think that PlayStation VR's got a very good chance just because Sony's got the distribution channels already, which I think is a huge upside for them.
Yeah, the only worry with those guys is they've obviously done a 3D TV thing before, and Move didn't really, they just, when they did the PS1 and they had to really push it, they showed how it works with, you spend money, not only do you bury your rivals like the Dreamcast and whatever else, they put it in clubs, they had it everywhere. That's what I would expect you need to do for something like PlayStation VR. They'd have to spend that sort of money again. I don't know whether they would anymore, whether the world's changed in the way they spend their cash. Back in the day, they made it a cool thing to have. I don't know how much it would cost you to make VR equally appealing or aspirational, I guess, in the same way Apple now obviously have it, how PS1 did back in the day for people bought that and they didn't play games, that's for sure. And, had music, they've made it into a cultural thing, which VR is going to be a hard one to convince, it's not really a lifestyle, I suppose. I
think that's a really interesting point about them making it into a cultural thing. It's not something I considered, but you're absolutely right, is they shifted the culture of gaming. And that's why it exploded at that point in time.
Yeah, kind of. It was just everywhere in smart ways, and then it definitely made life a lot easier for everything that came after it. But you haven't seen it on the same scale ever again, really. If you compare what they did with that to then, the following generation, with David Lynch doing crazy adverts, that's a company that's got confidence. You now know what a PlayStation is, because having a talking duck is definitely left field for spreading your message. So it's once it's done, it kind of works. I don't know if Sony, if it would work in the same way, or you'll end up with the Wii U had that problem of they just assumed everyone would know what it was, and your average person didn't know that the Wii U was a different thing, and that's when we get can you just buy the tablet? Oh, does it do this? Doesn't do that. You want to get them. Yeah, whether companies really put the time into seeing what the public are up to, I guess, as opposed to just what they think would work.
Well, before we talk more about going back to Loading Bar, let's talk about one of the games you've picked from this year. I have no idea what you've selected. Most of the people who come on don't actually tell me beforehand. So what would you like to talk about first?
So first up, I took the word game and decided in the joyous world of being self-employed, you don't really get much time to play games. So I wanted to pick something which, does it count as a game? It should do. So one of the first games, D&D. It's something I'd seen all the way through growing up, and I'd played a bit of Warhammer, and D&D was always that step too far. Similar to World of Warcraft, just leave that to the extremists. But then obviously community, IT crowd, I'd seen it loads, and a couple of good articles came out explaining the things D&D does that a computer game doesn't. So learning as you play it, the obvious options you just get a gun and shoot. That sort of thing isn't in D&D, at least if you've got a good person running it.
Yeah.
The great part of that game is the thinking outside the box. So the example on this thing I was listening to was you'd shoot a pillar and the ceiling would collapse, or you'd break you come up with better ways around than just attack everything inside, because it doesn't tend to work very well in that rule set. So it's something I played this year, and I really enjoyed, just because it's so different to any other type of thing, and it still lives and dies by, like any computer game, I guess, the person running it or creating it, how good or bad they are really affects, and the people you're playing with as well, for how invested they are in coming up with like crazy schemes, and the stories you get from it, with things like critical hits and misses, where there's always that scope for something to go catastrophically wrong, which I'm surprised more games haven't stolen. A lot of them borrow the whole dice rolling of what the number is then what happens, but you don't see much of the, when you roll a 1 in D&D, obviously, if the person running the game is imaginative, you'll get something horrific and usually quite funny, or like left field. Games don't really do that in the same way. You shoot the thing, it either hits and you get critical, or you don't. There's the, you try and open a door, but you get a 1, like crazy things occur just from opening a door, which gives you these insane stories to work with that kind of last. So.
Yeah, I think there are things in D&D that you couldn't put into a game, because it would be impossible to program a game that complex. Like you couldn't make it. I mean, I once, while playing D&D, we once talked around some henchmen, basically, and converted them to our side, and they attacked the wizard for us. Like that was awesome. And there are some games that have that kind of diplomacy system. Yeah, they kind of
dabble with it, because I was listening to a podcast, so Fallout New Vegas, apparently you could play it, if you got the right stats, you could play it as Doctor Who and just, chat to people. You never had to kill anyone. And then, obviously, how many people did that? Probably not that many, but like you had the option, which supposedly people have now tried with the new one, and like they've got rid of that.
Yeah.
And, you lose these like interesting ways to play, which, if those things are there, it seems weird that some games could have it, and just for whatever reason they choose to stick with it has to be this way, because even as a player, it was good for me just to learn, like, not just shooting everything. It's an interesting hurdle to have. Think outside the box and come up with a crazy scheme, roll the dice. It still usually went wrong whenever I tried it, because it's a dice roll, but that's something I never really had with any other game I played, where the goal wasn't very obvious. You had to put some effort in. And
I think for me as well, the difference with D&D is, while there are design decisions in the systems that are in it, but you're not locked into them in the same way that you are in a video game. Because in a video game, they've made a decision, and that's the decision. And in D&D, or even if you just play a board game, like when you play Monopoly, no one plays the right rules to Monopoly. Everyone has house rules for Monopoly. And it's the same thing, and you can't put that into a game, because the developers can't account for every tiny little tweak you might put on the systems in the game. And that's why, like, video games and pen and paper RPGs or board games or whatever provide you for, like, they are distinct experiences, and one is a lot more guided than the other, and I find that really interesting. No one has picked D&D before. No one has picked anything that's not a video game before.
I guess because most people have probably played it well before, like, 29, when I've played everything else it was. It just came around, and then it's something, like, I guess I could have made time for a computer game in that way, but it was like a one evening thing, and even if it can sprawl off, it was quite, it's quite self-contained, I guess, so I could, you can set that up, play a kind of 6 hour, and you still get a complete experience from it, whereas the problem I have with most games is, if I don't finish it within 2 to 3 days, that's it. I'll just get distracted by something else, have work to do, and then it kind of slips away. So Metal Gear, Arkham Knight, whole load of stuff. Basically, the way games are going now, if they all have pretty deep kind of narratives and campaigns take forever, they're all games I love, but just it's very rare that I then get a chance to sit and blitz through them in that way. So yeah, that's where things like D&D, and then my next choice be the same again. It's a little bit different, I guess, than a console game that someone would pick, I guess, normally.
We'll come back to that in a minute. But before we do, I'd like to talk to you, because you used to exist in Soho, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you moved out to sorry, get me right. You moved out to Dalston first. Yeah. So what was the transition from Soho to Dalston?
So Soho was horrendously expensive.
That I'll be honest, that was essentially my suspicion.
Which is okay, and this is like the bugbear we get over and over again. People go, most common feedback would be, you should be bigger. You should be in Central. Why is it not 24 hours, 7 days a week, overly staffed? And the reality is, when you tell people how much, what we paid just to be in Soho, which the rent wasn't bad, like for where it was 60,000 a year. That's quite a lot of money. And then your normal like business model thing will be, if you want like a beer maths approach, is you'll usually need to take quadruple whatever your rent is. So to cover everything else, like your utilities is about a quarter again of that, staff another quarter, then you've got this other quarter for the fridge blows up, the tables fall apart. So you've got it like, that's the minimum you need, which if you're talking 60 to begin with, that puts it to 220. And then obviously that you can divide by whatever you want to sell. So the people that always want to do like the esports stuff, and that we kept getting asked for, like LOL or like why aren't there those sort of cafes? And it's like, because the UK, there just isn't the space that if you work out, everyone's giving you like £1.50 for a Coke. Yeah. Multiply by like how many Cokes you have to sell to hit the 220,000, like just to not go under. So we did it for a year. We took a little bit over that amount of money. The problem we had with the space was there wasn't much more we could do in that space, and the guys we were working with on it wanted to do something else because, unlike me, who is stupid enough to do it mostly for the love, they wanted a little bit more out of it, which is cool. So we got offered the chance to go over to Dalston because it was someone else was involved in game development, had a bar, but wasn't doing much with it. So it was, they kind of offered it to us and said, come on board, do what you do there, but do it for us. And the trade-off was it's a much bigger space. So we could afford to do more we could take a few more risks and do more interesting events, but a killer of a location in that people have to travel. So Soho was amazing in that people then knew about us. So I think if we'd done Dalston to begin with, it's a much harder sell. Whereas from having been in Soho, at least we had a pool of customers and fans that were then like, oh, we kind of know what we're getting if we go to this other one. We like it, whatever. It helped massively for them. They were willing to travel a little bit, which I was amazed how many people were. And now we're busier than we were in Soho, and like it continues to grow. And that kind of surprised me that it did as well as it has. But we were just quite lucky again that the area was up and coming. And then Stratford, the reason why we wanted to come across to here was it was the same landlord, so we're lucky that he's incredibly mellow as far as landlords go and enjoyed what we did and wanted to support us. So he offered us another one of his pubs that he had and said, do you want to do the same thing again? And similar to Dalston, Stratford had, it's like an area that's developing, and then the difference between that and Dalston was it's much better connected. It's still further out, but you've got way more lines, way more reasons for people to be here. So the cinema, and we were interested in doing it because we could try something slightly different. So it meant I could bring in PCs and give that a test. And I wasn't really interested in cut and pasting it and just doing the same thing twice. We wanted to do like a companion thing for it, like how they'd feed off each other. So the idea with this one was then to be a lot more, I guess, accessible. So we choose what the games are. Board game wise, we still have a few, but there's about 40 at the moment that are all under half an hour. So it's a lot. The problem we have with Dalston is someone can pick out Battlestar Galactica, read the instruction manual for half an hour and still be none the wiser and know they're going to have to put it all away again because you've got no hope of deciphering that without any prior knowledge. So this way we wanted to make it a little bit slicker without people feeling stupid or as if they have to know something. It's like these are all, and then that way if they come in and love that and go, oh, we really like these, do you have any more? We can kind of feed the other venue and be like, yeah, we do. This other one has 100 plus games and a lot more of the, whatever it would be like next tier of board games. That's kind of the Soho to here link is kind of how that came together. And Stratford, we got offered it, and then because Dalston was doing well enough and it was at a stage where it was beginning to look after itself, I suppose, in that we built up enough regulars and it didn't require as much work. Decided to make life difficult for myself and attempt to instead. This one's going well, and it's nice to be able to offer something a little bit different. And with the PC thing that we got asked about, we've got that in here. And because there's so many good party games now, that's another thing that our audience, I don't think, would ever come across something like Gang Beasts. I know it's at EGX, I think, for the third year in a row now. Like, it's one of those things that type of game you're never going to find unless you're sitting and reading Rock, Paper, Shotgun, sitting and looking at, which, to most people, that isn't, that's not on their radar. They don't do that, and that's the silent audience people always talk about of, who's buying whatever it is, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, the not very good games or whatever. Like, it's all these people, like, they have no interest in that side of it in as much as, it's, if they get shown it and they like it, awesome, they'll go buy it. But that's not, they're not going to be sitting there poring over DLC controversy or, which platform is better. Like, they'll just buy the one that their friends got, and they're the people we like to kind of serve, I guess, and work with. In the, they're the dream audience we have, and then to be able to do stuff for the super niche is cool on top. But it's those customers that keep us going, because otherwise, when something like Fallout comes out, we'd probably go bankrupt, because everyone would be sat at home playing that if they were all your kind of stereotypical gamers. So that's the thing people tend to be surprised about, that our average customer is like not 16, they're mid-20s, have a job, probably wouldn't put games as their like primary interest. And it's this other person that, I guess, if you're looking to do it and all about the games, like, they wouldn't be the person you'd normally be trying to target first.
No, I think that's a very good point, and it's what people who are super involved in gaming don't realise, that there are people who like games, but they like games and a dozen other things kind of equally.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was that kind of tweeted out, but this thing, when there was whatever controversy it was that week, it was their example was like knitting. Like, there has to be this whole community of people that use Twitter that do knitting.
Yeah.
That they get the same problem. And it's this thing people mistake of, like, that's the way social media has gone, is like, your feed is full of people with the same interests as you, usually. Like, that's just, obviously, because you're going to be friends, or let's look at them. You think things might be far bigger than they are, or it's like the Google problem of most people didn't realize it filtered what they saw. So
yeah,
the number of times we get people asking about events, and then we'll be like, oh, cool, how's it going? Like, oh, we're number one on Google. On your laptop, number one on Google?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like, you do know that, no, is it? Really? Like, well, how much traffic do you get? Like, well, like 100 a month? Like, you're not number one on Google, then, are you?
No.
That thing that, and people just don't realize that it's kind of this, some of it intentional, with obviously your own filtering with who you're friends with, who you choose to follow, and also this kind of Google, like, filtering outside of what you might know is being filtered, where, people seem to think certain things there aren't these other people, or there isn't this other audience, or what's massive news isn't massive news, I guess. Which still surprises me when stuff like Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, that was in the Xbox the other day, because people just stuck it on, which, bemuses me that would be the one you'd pick out of everything else. But, like, it's that thing of, there are these people that have no prior knowledge, and it looked like a cool game to them, so they played it, and probably would have gone and bought it, which is this, they're as valuable as anyone else, this kind of thing. So we never go like, oh, you don't want to play, like, don't play that. That's what's quite nice to have.
Yeah.
And that's where having the games free has been the benefit for us. That's why companies like us, because if it was charged per hour, we would only really be doing FIFA, because they're the things people would pay for, like FIFA, Street Fighter.
Exactly.
Which is, I'd be far richer, and it's cool. But it was always about, like, the benefit for all those other companies is that when it's not the game that's the best, or it's like a 7 out of 10, that's the game that we do really well pushing, because it's just there. Obviously, we can put it in so it's there and they can swap it, but, like, that's the stuff people actually want to test, to be like, oh, can I just try this now? And, like, with their drinks, you're like, yeah, cool, it's free, give it a go. And then they go off and buy it, and that's why publishers like our model and tend to do stuff with us, because they know it puts something like Rayman Origins in people's hands, which game are never going to necessarily have those sort of games in the demo pod, because why would you? They want, they're pushing whatever the biggest seller is. So.
Yeah. Well, the thing is as well, is all you're doing if you're charging by the hour is keeping your audience niche. Like, because people want to come in, and it's like, if you go and watch the football at the pub or whatever, like, they don't charge you to watch the game that's on Sky, it's just there. And that's what you went to that pub because it's got the football on, and you're like, oh yeah, well, I like games a little bit, and this pub's got games, so we'll go and, like, hang out, and it's just a thing that's in the pub. And that model works, whereas if you're charging by the hour, you're moving towards being an arcade at that point.
Yeah, you filter, which, depending on what you're doing, and it's been quite cool that there's been more bars appearing in London that have all, luckily for me, I guess, gone in slightly different routes. Obviously, Meltdown is, esports led and shows the tournaments, and they're really into that. You've got Four Quarters, that this is like resurrecting an arcade, and bringing in old cabs, and Heart of Gaming is more your like community space with beat 'em up tournaments and the things that just wouldn't work for me, and that it's this kind of super hardcore audience that want to play that one game, and that's what works for them. So like it's been good. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other ones popping up that will start to do very similar things to exactly what those places are doing, I guess, or what we're doing. But it's cool at the moment because then it means, you know, there are those places if you want that, and that's where we usually push people if they do want, like arcades, we say like 4 quarters, or if you want an all-day thing for cheaper, like sweet, if it's less about drinks, Out of Gaming. And when they're like, where can I watch League of Legends, like, oh, go to Meltdown. And like you have this kind of all these different areas that people can go into rather than everyone all doing the same thing, which would sort of, there's an audience, but it's not mammoth. And that's the other thing of that's the reason there isn't one of these in the middle of central London, because it doesn't make enough money.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the same reason people get angry, like, why was Tomb Raider exclusive? Like, because it wouldn't have got funded if Microsoft hadn't paid for it.
Nope.
They wouldn't have made the game. And like,
nope.
And why Street Fighter this? Like, again, they didn't have the money to make it. That's why it's, but of course it would have. Like, no, that's just the way, like, they wouldn't have done it. They're not idiots. But they're like the business side people, and fair enough, like, if you're not in it, it wouldn't come up. But it's that thing of, once you understand that, you're like, oh, they're not evil or whatever, you know. Square don't hate PlayStation. Like, no, it's just Sony wouldn't have offered to pay for it and Microsoft would. So that, you know, as long as you get the game, that's kind of the main thing. And that's usually what we'll try and convince people or pass on and, you know, explain a little bit more if people do ask that sort of thing. To go, this is probably why. And they're not all as evil as is usually portrayed, I guess. There's always a story behind it of why something is the way it is. And
that's, people kind of forget that businesses exist for everyone and not just for you.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult to keep yourself open to that, to realize how many people there are and how different like everyone is. It's a very difficult concept to get your mind around sometimes. Let's talk about the second game that you've picked from 2015. What else do you want to talk to us about?
This was another one that it is a game, but it's not a game, and has done pretty well lately in one of the press. So, Subterfuge.
Oh yes, yeah, I like Subterfuge.
Yeah, like most people, I think I listened to Dark Souls. Got suckered in because they are very good at kind of evangelizing games. The concept itself appealed to me. The whole, it doesn't have to be real. You know, you don't have to dedicate lots of time to it. You can dip in and out. That obviously, if you've played it, you probably have the same experience.
Yeah,
that's not the way you play it. You still sit there and look at nothing happening all day, every day. And it's one of the first times I've taken my phone off silent in however many years, just to make sure that I had notifications. And there's a lot of things I would complain about in it. But also for just the entertainment I got from the one game I played through of it, it still was worth the money and well worth playing. And it was, you know, again, like a unique experience, I guess, in that I'd never played anything like Civilization with people I knew. So that type of game experience I hadn't had. So it was really good to play that, and the way it obviously mixes with, as you're playing with friends, the real world and destroying friendships. Yeah, it was like a really unique experience. Would I play it again? Probably not. But it was definitely a highlight this year to play through that over the, whatever it would have been, 9 days, I think it lasted.
I think you're right. Like, there's a lot of stuff it does badly. Like, it's way too systems heavy, and it's like the tutorial's a bit rubbish and stuff like that. Yeah,
there's lots you do on the fly, and the biggest, and it isn't like, the game obviously has to have the system of, you have to have time to respond, whatever, without being punished for not playing it. But it really rewards you not doing, like, you should always act second. And this was where it all went to pot for me, in that towards the end I had the time and it's like, so-and-so will win in 8 hours. So I just went for Operation Second Place and blitzed to attack someone, and then realised an hour later, because obviously once you've sent your things, you can't change it.
Yeah.
They just counter-moved it all, and then that's like, oh yeah. Which, like, it's fair enough that they have to be able to respond, but in such a way that it does pretty much punish you for doing something first. Because it's like, if I'd have just sat there, I'd still have everything. And it like, rewarding inactivity was the thing that I had a bigger problem with. Like, there has to be a way of kind of somewhere more in the middle that they should be able to adjust, but maybe because it tells them when they've done something, yeah, it felt very disproportionate. Like I just got obliterated because they just move things around.
I kind of think the idea that you talked about that your decisions are locked in is really smart. Like that's kind of what really makes the game for me.
Well, yeah, one idea we had, because there were three of us that teamed up, and we were like, what happens when we've beaten everyone else? Was this thing of, well, what we could do is just all queue up our moves and basically lock the phones away, and then, what happens, go for it. This idea of, like, could you play it in such a way where, a bit more like that, where everybody has their 1 hour, you do everything you want to do in that hour, and that's it for the day. Like, old school warfare style, like, you've sent the letter, whatever it may be, or a telegram, like, that is it. So you then have this mechanic of, there would be a lot more, like, you would try and break a deal, but it's all sealed envelope stuff of, like, right, has everyone queued their stuff up? Cool. That's done. And then, like, you check it again the next day and it shows you what happens. The problem with that is you all have to be on the same hour or something. Yeah. Like, this is but we were really interested and we all kind of agreed we'd have played it that way and still been as happy, because you could still screw people over, you could still, like, alliance, but it would be a lot nicer to know, like, everything is done. So you could pick to, do you defend, do you attack, whatever, give people. This idea of, like, locking something away and then you don't have to keep checking it. There's nothing to see until whatever time period, and then, like, boom, this is what went wrong and what went right for you. And then if there's a way, I think that would be the sort of thing that I would have gone back into it and done again. Whereas having played it, it didn't have the same appeal to go back through, because I kind of felt those systems are there, so you knew what. I would probably just sit there and not do much. And
I think that's a really interesting idea. They feel like a turn-based game where you get one turn a day or something, and then you're committed to it.
Yeah, I just thought it would be nice because of the way it is all about dialogue and this idea of, like, a UN meeting, and this is, the game would reflect that. Right, you're sat there talking, you have to then tell your military person whatever it is. Like, that's it. There is no in the world of war, like, quick changes or, like, we'll just wait to see what they do, and then because it'll take, it would reflect a bit more like, oh no, they've just come and attacked, and we should have. I think it could make an interesting game, but I'm sure, seeing how well it's probably done, there's tons of devs with hundreds of ideas of similar things, especially with the way it pulls in chat and it pulls in kind of real world and virtual world interactions, and I can see more games trying to build on that. And
absolutely, I think it's that the as you say, the chat system being more than just like, oh, you can talk. It's an integral part of the game to talk.
Yeah,
and that's fascinating. Not a lot of games do that well, and they've done it superbly by sort of tying it into the mechanics of the game, and I love that. It's one of those ones where they've taken a core mechanical vision and like we said, there's problems with the game, but they've executed the core vision of it is executed superbly. Yeah, it's great. I absolutely adore. It's a genius game.
Yeah, it's something like I've told other people to play. It's just they're like, I'm not going to play it with you, but you should play it. And then the whole, do you play with friends or not? I'm not sure. Like, the good thing for us is we had one person that was like someone's flatmate that was a complete stranger. I think a mix is definitely good.
Yeah.
There's still, because of the way the map puts you in places, you will have to fight the person next to you because they're all with the way the time works. So I don't think it's too big a problem if it's kind of some people some people you don't. Because I still, at some point, if they're stuck right next to you, you're going to have to fight. There's no way around that. So yeah, I think if you can get a few people, or just like friends of friends, is the dream setup. So you can all meet up afterwards and we're all in person and get angry.
As you say, I think if anyone's interested, I mean, you talked about Dark Souls, but I think if you go on which is the same guys, but Cool Ghosts, where they've got the video series, is it's so good.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously I caught up with those guys. Joe Scrabbles does their Drink Along with the X-Files podcast thing here in the bar. So
okay.
Obviously I played Subterfuge in between the 2 weeks of the podcast. Like, the first one they love it, the second week they then obviously talk about all that's wrong with it. And then obviously here I was like, you son of a bitch. Like, start with that. Then he's like, yeah, rubbish. Don't. And then obviously because the podcast is a week behind, I then called with him. I was like, oh man, you sold it so well. I'm like, yeah, we did. And then we played it. And we realised all that's like good and wrong with it. And yeah, I think even with those diaries, it's like, watch the first 3 or 4, and then if you're going to play it, make sure you play it before you see. And it's kind of good, I guess, because we all came away from it appreciating war, and government's a bit more of like, wow, pretty tiring.
Yeah.
Warmongering and just trying to be diplomatic. And
it is.
And that's still good. That's part of the experience, I think. If you just came away super happy fun, it wouldn't be the same. Like it does what it does very well. And there's other games that you can play to get that kind of happy experience or whatever, of like you just want to play with friends and sort of screw them over. No, I think this, as long as you know what you're getting into, it's a really good experience.
Well, let's return to your bar adventures. Are you running a lot of nights and streaming events there?
Yeah, so streaming was something we kicked in kind of middle of this year, and having taken on the second pub, I've scaled it back again because it was just taking up quite a lot of time. But it was something we wanted to do because we had a load of people that were, it's the usual complaint of everything in gaming in the UK happens in London, and there's reasons for that, and also it is annoying if you're not in central London, you miss out on a lot. So it was something, the streaming was like a nice way of putting people in the bar, but they don't have to be in the bar. And as a business thing, ludicrous idea. Mm-hmm. Then you don't make money out of it. But it was this, we did it with the chiptune gigs, and it got a lot of response with just, I wouldn't do it, but people really enjoyed being able to like watch stuff happening in a bar and interact with it. If you're not based there, like we had someone that was streaming one of the gigs, they were sat in their car because they didn't have the internet at home to wait for the gig to finish. Like, man, I'd go to bed. But there was that audience for people that wanted to kind of interact with those events, but couldn't get there. So it's something we've tried to do more and more whenever we've got interesting things happening. And there's like a launch event, give people another way to like, you can watch it online, and essentially that's free for people. So you don't have that barrier of you've got to be in London or you've got to have the money spare to burn, and they can still get an experience out of it. So it's one we're going to bring back. And now we've got 2 pubs. There's a ton of schemes where I basically want to battle bar 1 against bar 2. So we were going to pick a game and have like pub versus pub. So something like Rocket League, and then best of however many, and then whichever team wins, that pub gets cheaper drinks. So
okay, I like that.
If you're sat there just as a customer having a beer, that's such an easy thing to explain. Even if you hate games, to be like, if this dude wins, your next beer is £3, not £4. Like we thought that will capture people's interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
In like a simple way where it's not a complicated league format or crazy things. And then with the streaming, that was one, like it fits quite well as a format.
Oh yeah.
Stream and more bits along those lines. We did the Rocket League tournament, which the first one was all industry teams. So that helped draw in an interest. And then you had the fans of those sites. So yeah, like IGN had a team, GameSpot had a team, Vice had a team. And like you had all those different audiences interacting with each other and obviously supporting their respective like website of choice. And that was another one that, despite the text being a bit ropey, people really liked the bits where there was a commentator, and not the kind of esportsy style, but more 90s television, because we're all that kind of age of like, it's a little bit shonky, but it's a bit more like, it's more immediate, I guess, for people and it's, it's someone they know as opposed to teams. So that we want to do more of that going forward, of showing things in the bar. And the other gimmick, I guess, is that you can go there, which so much stuff you can't. So the other trade-off is if you do want to go to the next one, like you can watch it once and then you can just turn up there. And it's not like, you can't enter that because you're not fanatic or you're not 33 qualifiers. Like, cool, if you want to come down, it's like next month, Thursday. There you go. There's no elaborate barriers. So it kind of makes it interesting. Like if you watch it and then decide you can do better, like, sweet, come and beat those people the next time. So that's been quite nice. And we were doing the live streams from downstairs to like chat to sat, of mixing those audiences with all the stuff like YouTube. It's still a bit indirect. So to have a place attached has, obviously for a pub, that's cool because we want people to come in anyway, but we really wanted to work with that. Like there is a space you can come to. Same for the game launches, same for like devs showing off their games. It was cool for them because again, it's like, oh, I will be there, so I'll do the stream and I'll be around. And that's much easier than when it is at studio or it's in YouTube's office where they're not set up for that type of thing. And fair enough, they've got way more kit and don't want 50 to 100 nerds running around fiddling with things. But like for us, for them to come down afterwards is like great. It's just more like a live audience. So the dream is still to do some sort of TFI thing, but for like a games event. So that'll be breakfast for our two. Like
that would be fantastic.
Again, very nostalgia tinted. That it would probably be rubbish in execution, but that's what we've been trying to build up to. Of can we do like an old school? And then audience wise, they've been the people who've been getting watching it, which is quite nice because it's that whole. It's a different crowd that aren't necessarily like your usual Twitch people. So it's been good that we've got that older demographic again, or similar to the bar, trying to get like you would not watch a game thing, but you might watch this because like there'll be a band playing, there'll be some chat. Like it's more accessible. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I'll watch it rather than the kind of the other content you get where it's more like a streamer just shoutcasting something, which for like a younger audience, that's what they've grown up with and totally get. But anyone over a certain age, that's something you have to kind of work your way up to.
I really like the what you're saying about it being attached to the bar because it makes it a lot less abstract. It's a lot less like when you watch League of Legends or whatever. It's like, oh, here we are in this arena or whatever. But with a bar, it feels a lot more like intimate, and it feels both like more accessible and like not in like less of an event, but not in a negative way. If you understand what I mean, it's as you say, it's just I could go and do that. Like I could go and play that game. It's
like they're a crowd of people, and our thing we were trying to pull together was like, if you take football as the example, there are a million tiers of football, like pub league, and we were like, why is there not a stream that is essentially pub football but pub? And it's hard, you can't really vet it because, you know, people would probably say, I've never played this game, it'd be amazing, but to the best you can is like, yeah, we want those people. So when we did Rocket League, it wasn't the best of the best because that's already been done and is done to a very, we were like, no, we want like that thing of everyone around the same kind of skill level, but you know, you get, it's that kind of entry ladder, I guess, and then, you know, someone might do that and then decide that's for them and look to get into it properly, but also there's people that are quite happy with their Sunday pub league football and that's all they'll ever want to do, and that's where we were like, there's tons of interesting things that will happen in that you would never get in the usual stuff that gets streamed online because it tends to be geared to the high level play, and with most game stuff, like there's a lot of value and stories in the anything can probably happen because they have there's always that element they don't know what they're doing. That's still the model we want for tournaments of like it's a Sunday league thing as opposed to ever becoming pro, because there's guys that do that and put the money in and do it incredibly well. But we were like, there's an audience of that other, you know, the same people that do go and stand in the rain and watch amateur level stuff. That's gaming will get that, I would imagine, and like, that's what we want to kind of get involved in and build and give people a way in that's not, you don't need to feel stupid watching it. It's like the people involved probably know the same amount you do. So it's like, it's not as intimidating, which was something when we did events, we had Riot show their LCS stuff, and once I played the game afterwards, I totally got like, oh, that's what was going on. But to try and watch that, even with their community guy explaining what was going on, I still was completely lost. Whereas Street Fighter and other ones are easier to watch at that level because it's like, cool, there's two bars, the one that drops loses, you get that. But other games don't work in that way.
Well, that's why something like Rocket League is perfect.
And yeah, Rocket League still has that. It's very simple.
Yeah. Because even people who don't like football kind of understand enough to be able to watch Rocket League. And it's the same, as you said, it's the same with Street Fighter, it's like, whichever one of these is still on his feet at the end wins. Done.
Yeah.
And it's like those kind of simple games are great. And I also think the thing with Rocket League that's genius is because it's slightly newer. And I think that's also what you need, because it stops you getting those, as you say, those amazing players coming in and just wrecking everyone. And
it's like become YouTube's hallmark of the like games with controls that don't work very well, but they sort of do. So like Gang Beasts built on like no one is particular. It doesn't look graceful, but it works because it keeps everyone at like that at a nice level, and like, yeah, you can get good at them in the same way among your friends, and yeah, Rocket League, you can get slick at it, but that first, the curve is nice enough that for a good however many hours, you'll be as good as the other person, usually. Like, you can play it, pick it up, and you won't be horrific or feel stupid. There's limited buttons, and it's very, like, this is what you do. Hit the ball in that goal and try and stop them hitting the ball in your goal. And it's that thing of they pick up speed really quickly because they're fun to watch because it's not slick. There's that charm to them, I guess, for all those games, that they have that.
I think, as you say, like, Gang Beasts is a game that it is, like, you can get, as you say, you can get better at it, but I think it's a game that's almost impossible to be good at. Like, I don't think there is anyone who is going to be, like, a professional Street Fighter player to someone who's just come into Street Fighter. There's, like, the game doesn't allow you to get that difference in skill level just because of how it works. And the other thing I just think, like, the best way to play Gang Beasts is with beer. Yeah. It's a game that is perfect for that. And I've played it in situations where, like, you aren't drinking. It's not as enjoyable. Like, it's way more enjoyable at a huge event and there's a load of people watching.
Those games interest me just because it's like, where is that going to go when it comes out? As much as, like, if you don't live in a shared house with 4 pads that sync up, like, with the adapter, like, who is going to buy that? And that's what's, like, we've had people that have played it here the last couple of weeks, we've had it, and they're like, oh, cool, yeah. It's like, reckon they're going to buy that? Probably not. Like, it's that thing of how big is the audience, whereas at something like EGX, it'll be the biggest queues there, which is like, because it's, I'll be interested with how big it is now as to what it actually sells. And it's like a weird niche of games of that whole local multiplayer is, like, definitely on Steam. There's loads of good games, but it's like how well they do compared to something like Rocket League that has that online part. And yes, it still has the good split screen 2v2 you can do on the same console, but also it works online is what helps that push way further, because you can sit there and get a game that's the same. Like, it's still got the same carnage because you've got 5 other people over the internet playing with you that I don't know. Things like Gang Beasts, it's going to be a hard one. Rumour is it's going to get a very good single player. Like, how or what that becomes, I have no idea. But, like,
I don't know how do you put single player
take on it. I guess it's kind of cool that they're doing that as opposed to just it has a box mode or it has and I guess that's off the back of that problem. They know that however many hundreds of thousands of people are playing that game now at different things and events. How do you make them buy it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. At least beyond, I guess, some sort of Octodad style, put something in it. But, like, it'd be interesting how those games evolve, or do you just stickers? It is what it is, and the budget's kind of cut accordingly.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap things up, let's find out, what is your third and final game that you've picked?
I thought I'd better pick just a real game.
Okay.
If you ask me to pick 3, that's a bit. Also, Pro Evolution Soccer.
Okay. That's a good pick.
Mainly for the obvious reasons, but for my age, Pro Evo I was the right bracket where that was, like, the game I loved. And the first one I bought was completely by accident. Like, my first job, it changed owners, so the owner left and gave me, like, a £50 bonus. I think I was about 14 and went to Woolworths, which rests in peace. And because I was stupid, 14 with weekly money, I just went and looked at what games were available. And for the PlayStation, it was Pro Evolution Soccer, so I bought that and then just got blown away by it, even though at the time I wasn't massively into football. But just at the Master League and snowballed, and then obviously I picked the right time, because then all the way through uni it was kind of the best game, and then it all went a bit hot. And then, like, I kept getting told it was sort of back to form, and then last year's was the first one, Box Engine, and then I had that ruined for me when someone pointed out it didn't have rain. Which is a thing I never would have noticed in a million years.
If someone hadn't said no, you wouldn't.
A journalist was just like, yeah, it doesn't have rain because they didn't have time to do it. I was like, oh, why did you tell me?
Yeah.
He was like, have you noticed that every match is set up? But then this year, like, it just plays very well. Even the kind of the bits Konami get in trouble for, like the My Club, which is, I guess, their Ultimate Team. FIFA Ultimate Team I've spent some money on, and I don't quite see why people get so angry about those modes
No.
I kind of get to manage a team, and Pro Evo this year, because I haven't tried their My Club before, but I got enough out of it for, with their freemium money. I didn't have to put money in, and I haven't in that yet. So I think it's well balanced. At least it was up until last month when I ran out of time to play it. But through it's a good game and the nostalgia power that has stood out for me this year in that I could get back to playing it, and now my objective is convince enough people that come in the bar it's good again and get them to play it, because it's still that thing of it doesn't have the licenses and you can import them now, but that still took me an hour and a half, I think, to the Premier League teams, which an average person is not going to do. Not at all. Even if you love football, you're not going to sit there and cut and paste 3 kits or whatever for every team.
Yeah, that is my main issue with Pro Evo.
I completely understand why they haven't made it just, import all, because then their argument legally of we didn't know we would do this if it would be a bit difficult, but it's crying out for it should know what the files are and just do it. Because it's always been something since I had the PS2. I knew you could do that, but ordering USB memory cards off eBay or taking a punt and buying a memory card online and hoping it has the file on it, whereas I just never did. Whereas this year was the one, obviously, with PlayStation, no, you just USB it. And it took me 2 attempts, but I got it to work and was still it's good. But if they can just tweak the grey areas of the lore a little bit more to make it so that a normal person, you just go, you download this thing onto USB, you put it in, if it's named properly, copy all, and it will just do it in numerical order or something. I think, because the game it adds that sheen of authenticity again of it's all the right, the kits look great, and the experience is just that much nicer.
I've got huge respect for the people who sit there and put all that data in.
Yeah, I hope however much they get in donations and other bits, they deserve every penny. So I was trying to work out, if I'm whinging about an hour and a half, obviously they quite rightly can complain how long it must take them, and I'm fairly sure this year and previous years they get leaked copies of that nice and early to make sure.
Yeah, because it's way too quick.
And you can argue they can't make it too easy to import, but it doesn't take someone must still have the problem of how did these guys get all of this stuff made within 4 days?
Yeah, exactly.
A retail copy, and they bought it from a dodgy shop. All right, 10 days, still not long enough.
Not to get
weird,
the amount that's in there.
Yeah, it's a weird balancing act of would they get in trouble if they just did it and made it easier to import? Or I think they must know how kind of fast and loose it would be with them getting in trouble.
It's one of those things where you really with the size of the people they'd be going up against. You don't want to push it. Yeah,
quite rightly. I know they've complained many times. It's just ironclad the contract that it has, and they know what they're doing for that reason. It's worth every penny to them that it stops something else overtaking them. But it's I don't know how much they need to raise to just put in a better bid. You'd probably find enough Pro Evo addicts. Would pump the money in if it's chip in to help get some sort of license. Maybe in 10 years, who knows? If they do a really good job. The problem I think FIFA has, and it's a bit unfair, is now the review and Call of Duty gets it as well, of it's incredibly slick, but it's the same as last year, but it's as slick as it's going to get. Without changing how football is. It's so difficult for those games, and it's a weird one for the way reviews work, of some people have a problem with that, and obviously the mass market don't, because they just go buy it because, I want more of that game. What's the problem? But it's a weird problem of FIFA isn't rubbish. It's very, it does everything very well, but they get beaten because they haven't changed it or iterated on it. And, until you get a new platform, that's very hard to do, I think. And what they can do with it, I have no clue really, beyond the usual problem of the crowd. And the reason I think they don't do it is just, no one would look at it really. And they know what gets played and what doesn't. I'm sure people just skip those cutscenes. There isn't much you can tweak without it.
No, there's not.
At least not that would make a difference. Them adding female footballers is a brilliant touch. Hopefully they expand that and put in more of the teams. But there's only so many of those type of things you can add in before. Yeah, and if they do change it, all the people that love it then wouldn't play it because it's you changed the buttons.
There's just the return on investment for improving the crowd and stuff isn't worth it, like you say.
Like still we're waiting for, I think you'll get more season passy, but the subscriptions, the way everything is going now, it's like, it surprises me they haven't done it already, of just £10 a month, but you get FIFA, and that includes like when the new one comes out, you get all the updates, they'll add in new things, like rather than it comes out every year, more it is FIFA, and then every month something new gets patched in, and then like they'd obviously be making, if they charge more per month, like they'd make more than they make now from the game, and I think the majority of their audience would just do it. It's like that, something like Street Fighter, those games that don't really change, but you've got this fan base that they're happy to support it and keep it going. I think it would be nice to see those sort of games get more like a PC game, where you've got this like early access type thing of you're getting content throughout, rather than just wait till next year and like doesn't add that much. But like if that was over the year, I think people would be happier. It's just like, oh cool, they've added like so many of these teams, and then like, oh, they've just patched it, so now the crowd is better. And with the way most consoles are, as much as they say they're not, they are online only, really. Like the bulk of stuff I played this year is. So the whole reason everyone got angry about Xbox seems to have gone away, in that most of the games in the Game of the Year lists won't work without some form of big patch or online. So I think you could definitely do that model and do okay, and still have the disc, you know, if people want all that on there as like the last edition. But yeah, subscriptions is the one we've been pestering publishers for a while whenever we spoke to them. Those kind of games, something like Street Fighter, where it doesn't have the money in the same, you know, it's not worth them pumping in that, at least to have that money to develop with, rather than, you know, well, we know it's only going to sell this many, like it might not do as well as the last one. Like, subscriptions are always good because you've got this, like, you can slowly see it drop, or the like you know what's coming. So I think games, and obviously EA has started doing it with Xbox with the EA Access thing, and PS Plus is kind of that, but this whole, like, imagine how much people would pay if they just got every Sony first-party game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Free with it. Like, they pay more than the games are. For your average person, you're like hardcore gamers that know I can buy it for £20 wouldn't, but the people that only buy FIFA and COD, that's like
absolutely.
£80 a year. You could easily shunt them to £10 a month.
Yeah.
But they get, like, all of those games, which is what I thought Xbox was going to do when they first announced it. Well, not announced it, but when they were like partnering with EA.
Yeah.
And there were the rumors.
It seemed like that's what they were going to.
The AAA machine with the whole pre-owned thing. That's how you got those guys on board, because then, you know, they know who's got their game. And some of the perks for it were really good. That stolen games wouldn't have been a thing, because if you stole my disc, you take it to the shop, it's linked to my account. It comes up with, so like you have to have the ID that matches the name. On that account, like that is a good feature. And like if I want to give it to you, I could just send it to you, and like my disc doesn't work anymore, but you have the digital version, and they can log all of that. And it's like there was a lot that would have worked with it. I think where they went wrong is they should have just built in the amount of phones that are in landfill. How hard would it have been to have put like a little modem inside them, or like a mobile phone dial-up? And obviously you couldn't play online with it, but their whole the always online was to check the licenses twice a day or something. What the data in that would have been, a couple of megabytes, if that. They could have solved so many people's fears if it just said, because you were going to play for Xbox Live anyway, just, you know, the console will check. If your internet is down, as long as it's somewhere where there's like really poor 3G, it will dial out itself. I think there will wait as an idea, and I think the next, whatever comes next, will just do that anyway, because people have slowly, whether they know it or not, it's all online anyway. So
yeah, I think the only problem with it is like you push out a lot of edge cases. Like there are definitely places where, like one of the big examples was military bases. Like it's played on forward operating bases in Iraq and at the time in Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that where internet connectivity is insanely restricted.
Yeah.
And you are going to get those edge cases, and that's a real issue you have to deal with. And with all things for businesses, you have to decide whether alienating that chunk of people is worth it or not. And maybe it is. Like, that's a difficult call to make.
Yeah, it's kind of, and that's that thing. If it was only it was only to dial out, and it's where I'm surprised we haven't seen retail go as well, with the like, just take a memory stick in, or like you want to buy the game that's 50 gig, like have somewhere like EA have a shop that you just go in, and they obviously have it downloaded. Like you cut and paste the file and get you could get around a lot of those problems of like the whole download chunks of like when I buy the game, why can't I just buy it on a memory stick and then put the memory stick in my console? Or obviously you still buy the game on, be it like on Xbox Live as normal.
Yeah.
Like you get that. That's how you get that data around the whole.
Yeah.
Like, well, I can't download this digital whatever. Like, cool, we'll just send you it all on USB. Done. And like military bases, whatever. Like, just to approve the licenses. Like, or you probably get some people abuse it, but there's ways they could have. Like, it was just interesting that it was so far down the line, and then they just. People like it picked up steam online, but it was that thing of what about the silent audience that would have loved stuff like I can just give you a game now without having to give it to you personally. Done. And like, cool, you play it for a bit, give it me back, and I can play it again.
Yeah.
And the fact they had publishers on board, because the original problem would have been like, well, surely EA would have got angry or someone, because like they don't want me to give you like we could just have you could share games with someone essentially, because I don't know, they work days, you work nights, you just swap the game back and forth. But I think the data they would have got would have definitely helped game players of like where. Did everyone keep selling that one copy of whatever it might be, Battlefront, after 15 hours? Like, yes, they did, because we can see on the graph, this guy had it, this girl had it, this guy had it, someone else had it.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have got, I think, that kind of information would have been really good for guest cases of, like, it has to have a single player, or it has to have whatever. They'd have the arguments for all of it then, to be like, well, we know this one copy went through 50 people that all didn't really know each other, like, and you can build that into what you do next. And I think that would have helped, because obviously the biggest problem with the whole period is like they have no clue. And you get those games that just live on pre-owned shelves and do incredibly well, but for the publisher do nothing, because they never see it. They do that print run and they never restock it because it's just the same couple of copies. Whereas this, if it had been digital, at least they'd know, and you could work on better ways to like, cool, we can just tweak that a bit and sell more of the next one by doing this thing, or this is what they played. But it's kind of fair enough that people didn't want, depends what you're up to, whether you wanted Xbox or whoever, Sony to know what you were doing. But for me, like, the not getting stuff stolen is obviously good for us as a bar, and just the whole digital thing of just passing around, I don't think was as big a problem as people thought it was with the whole I can't swap a game. Like, you could have done. And it was odd that Microsoft didn't ever come out and try and explain it. And we were doing work with them before it launched, and then obviously they just shut down all their PR and were like, no, we just don't want to talk to anyone now. It's like, well, you could have just messaged this and people would be fine. And we got an Xbox One at launch, and it was like, cool, can we get some, like, the same stuff Game have you got any details on what it does? And they're like, no. Like, sorry, you don't have any material that we can, like, you can brand the area, do what you want. No, we don't have that. Like, where did Game get theirs from? Our Game make it themselves? Like, it's cool for me. You want to give me a console? Great. I was like, I want to help people know what it is.
You're not getting anything out of this deal.
And, like, obviously people play it and then might go buy it, but I was like, and that was the thing the first year we had it. So many people thought it played old games, and, like, we kept feeding that back to them. Like, this isn't one confused old person. This is, like, a whole cross-section of people just don't know that. And they're like, yeah, it'll be fine. Like, don't worry about it. Like, does this not tell you, like, if we're getting this, surely every shop is also getting this? And, like, it's weird that you're gambling on someone that's paid minimum wage in a shop where they're forced to upsell. Like, they're not in it to convince people, like, what it does well or not. They'll just be there, like, selling whatever sells best, or being a little bit kind of vague with what the truth is, just to get the sales. So it's like, there's like cheap things they could have done. It's like, why is there no like video for this? Oh, well, we just decided not to. Or like, you're spending whatever on a billboard. You could at least do like a print ad or some.
Yeah, just anything.
And I get the bigger you get, the harder that sort of stuff is to do. But it's all the like, that's the stuff that tends to annoy me a lot when we're doing these things with companies. They're like, this would really help. You should do this. And they're like, yeah, we can't do that. And some are better than others for getting those materials to us, or getting stuff early, or being a little bit more open to like, you can put this out, just don't tell people. It's, don't spam it, but we want people to play it. And like getting away from the very old school, like press play it, whatever, play it. It's like, if you've got it playable, invite some public, and they're slowly coming around to that with the whole, like inviting community along and it's like they're the guys that buy it. They're like your best people, and they're the ones that normally get treated the worst. Like they know probably who's bought the last 10 FIFAs. Give that guy a free copy. He'll blitz your game way more than anyone else will.
Yeah.
It's like, but they never do that. It's like, oh, we'll just get a box of whatever it is. Mad Max t-shirts. And we're like, why didn't you give these away at the time? Like, well, we have to save them until such a point, and then it goes out of date, and then we can't use them. It's like, you're just giving these to fans. And they're like, yeah, too much effort. Like, you do it. And then people run in and be like, I take this. Like, that's amazing. Great.
Yeah.
T-shirt. Like, it's that slowly getting rid of that divide. Like, it doesn't cost them any more. We're like, you could have just, and because they obviously have social, they now can talk to their audience direct themselves. We're like, talk to the guys that have bought the strategy guide, that buy it for 60 quid, because they're the reason that it still exists, not the person that buys it secondhand for 20 or downloads it illegally, but is the person on maybe chat threads pretending they're the biggest fan of it. Your best customers are the ones that pay the most, surely, and they're the ones that don't get any of this like event stuff or free copies or codes or like assistance, which seems really odd to me. And you've got like Sony have suddenly got better at it with all their indie stuff, and like it's getting companies to get out of that mindset of like, you can find those people, like they're the ones you want, and empower them to sell your stuff for you, because they'll do a much better job than anyone else will.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think like fans saying to fans is always good, and in a way it would be good for like specialist press, because it frees you up to write about games in a different way. It frees you up to not just be like writing about what is like this game is good or bad or whatever, but it allows you to go and do the more in-depth stuff.
Which is, they're the things that seem to do the best, whether they definitely do, because I don't run a website, but like, yeah, those stories of, people doing profiles on like what Polygon used to do with like the Street Fighter movie, like that sort of content that's very removed, but like something like video gamers' video output suddenly getting so popular, like it has nothing to do with games really, but that's what that audience kind of want, because there's already a million places to get like you said, the usual, like the boring list points. That's now done in a video, or like, it just don't really need to know it. Whereas people doing like XCOM diaries or like the Subterfuge diary, stuff like that that's the content that sells way more, will sell the game far better than 10 identical reviews, because they all got the same review experience that they were maybe got made to do beforehand. Like, it's that thing of, giving those people, or like those fans that make all the fan art, like get them the game early, and like they're starting to do a little bit more of that, but it's still like the last thing they do is like, or they wouldn't go to a shop and give it to like the people that buy that. They will do a Twitter thing and the 10 super fans that turn up.
Yeah.
Which is why whenever we do community parties, we hammer them for like make it public access, because like you'll get a random couple that will come in that have no clue what your game is, and whereas you'll get the super fans that rock up, go, what's the free swag? It's a bit like Freshers Fairs. It always happens. Like, what's the free thing?
Yeah.
Oh, this, like, sweet buy. And you're like, was that worth it for you? Like,
but like
for them, when they're like, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
like,
but they're going to buy your game anyway. Yeah,
well, and they're the ones that I would say most of them definitely don't buy it at full price. But like, they're still great customers, but it's like, if the first thing you get asked is what's the free thing, and then they leave, is like, they're not like, that's a totally, they're not your evangelist. They're just your kind of like, and some people will just rock up. Like I did the PlayStation 20th anniversary thing and queued all night like an idiot to get the cheap console.
Yeah.
Half of that queue was just people because they got told it was £20 for a PS4, so they queued to then sell it, which it's fine, but like, because of the way they were so obtuse with how they marketed it, the people that joined that queue were the people that happened to be walking past Shoreditch High Street.
Yeah.
And the people in the queue said, yeah, if you've got an old PlayStation game, you get a PS4 for £20. It's worth £1,000. And it's like, why? Why do it this way? And like, we have to, because it's all clever And like, it still would have got the news coverage it got, which is the story was the PlayStation was £20. Like, that will get you all the press you need. So like, why they didn't just, like, it wasn't open to anyone, and that's normally the argument they would give of like, oh, the reason we do it this way is so, like, not a chance. It was the people that happened to be near that place at that time, and that's why they got such a backlash of the people that have then went, well, I bought whatever, like PS1 on launch for this much money. I bought the PS2 at launch. I bought this at launch. Like, where's my chance to get this cool thing? Like, yeah, that is the person you should be hooking up.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're, rather than it was just some guys that happened to be in East London, and then they were already putting it on eBay before they got it. And there's way, like, I guess you can't be super brutal with how you police that, but it's like a little bit more of a check than just, that's easy to just go down the queue and know exactly why they're there. Like, what's your favourite play? It's not super fact checking, but it's like, you could spot a mile off which people were in that line.
Yeah.
That were there for, whether they figured out the cryptic puzzle or not. Like, they were the ones that should have got it, not the guy that went, what's this queue for? Like, of course they're going to queue for...
Yeah, it's just a bit disappointing.
What is essentially, and hopefully things like that backfiring a little bit have shown them, like, we shouldn't do it that way. We should do it this way. And, like, you'll still get the press you need, I think. It's just they're a bit used to the old style, like, you have to do this because if the stunt's crazy enough, it would still work. And you can still support those fans rather than, like, first come, first serve, which is, that's why those PlayStations are now in CEX and keep coming up. It's like, was it worth it when you could have, they'd have been, I said, just better giving it to people instead. And
absolutely.
People still would have killed them for it and moaned because they didn't get one, but at least you could have justified, like, oh, we tracked down the person that was at the front of the queue. That's a press, that's a video you can make. And we went and found the person that made this really cool custom. And it's getting away from agencies and more like the company's doing it a bit more direct than just a PR firm, which is the ones that tend to do well are those guys that are doing it in-house. We've worked on press events and it's like, it's for a franchise and we'll pitch stuff where we want to reference old games in that series. And then we've been told, no, you can't do that because this is for the new game. We're like, you do, like, it's going to be full of fans. It's fan service. They'll like it. Why can we not mention the old games? They're like, no. We've been hired to promote the new game, so you can't do that. It's like, why? It makes no sense. Surely if they buy the old games, they still get money. And it's that weird, like, third party involved is where we just die a little inside. And it's like, so you want to promote it, but you don't want to talk about the franchise. Like, no, like, this is weird. Because all the people there are going to have their tattoos or whatever from that. And there's all this little stuff you could pull in to make it, better for them, but you're not going to do it because they didn't pay you to promote the old games. Okay, all right, weird. Sure, go for it, and like slowly, like you're getting more specialists, and that's the thing. Over the 5 years I've done it, like it's got so much better for that, but it's still you will get stuff where that happens, and it's like it's not for it's not to the audience because the person coming up with the thing is looking at it from like they have no clue what the game is or have played it, and that's where you just need like someone involved. So put a token fan in there. It's like just one of them would do, just a bit of balance for like what would you want, and then they'll normally have the best idea.
Well, that's who you're selling it to. That's who it's going to.
Yeah, and they'll suggest it, or you can ignore it afterwards. But at least you've had that pitch rather than it gets to the point where it's too far gone, and they're always like, well, no one said this originally, and that's why 2K have got quite good at it lately. Of they're trying to get their stuff out way in advance. So bits like Battleborn, that's still a year off, and like they're getting it in as many people's hands as possible. And why they set up their like gaming space is this thing of like the more people that play it, the better it is for us. And devs have the same problem where they don't want to show it, but it's like people can appreciate it might not be done yet and it's broken. But like if there's something to play, that feedback is like, makes a world of difference. And why something like Rocket League was so good is because it was, whatever sequel of and an iteration of a really old game that they've worked on for years. Like it was honed over time rather than just this like left field creation no one had seen before. Like that was off the back of like playtests, older versions and honing it. So I think the more games get away from this, like you can't see it because it would affect the launch. Like how in any way would, there's nothing we've shown, even bad games, that people like have have backfired. Like, someone would like it. That's just the way it goes. Like, there'll be unless it's really bad, like, every game has something redeeming, or like, there's usually the rule, nothing is bad in local co-op. So, like, they're even for stuff where they hold it back until launch. It's like, you could just put it out and you'll get more from it than keeping it top secret and kind of releasing it to die. And I like Tony Hawk's or something like that. So, you know, like, even that, you wouldn't have had that issue had they had to show it a month before, because a million people would have been like, you can't do, like, you would just, it works in a better way that you've at least gotten. That's the whole bonus PC has of modders and to fix a lot of your problems. And that's the, you know, like the Konami thing, you're giving them Pro Evo, at least they can make all the kits for you, like a bit more of that, where it's, has always been a thing we've tried to do, is mixing, like, anyone involved in games can come in. So when people want to get into games or speak to, we're like, if you hang around long enough, the person that made that game is probably going to come in for a beer. And if you know who they are, cool. If you don't, we're not going to point them out, because that's weird and they just want their beer in peace. So when we've been asked for that kind of thing, we're like, no, we can't tell you when someone famous is here. Sorry. But like, if you're into it and know who you want to speak to, like, it's that.
Yeah.
Putting people in touch, or like when we've had events, is like, cool, can we invite another like 50 of our regular customers? Because they're not people that would even have a clue you're doing this, but we can tell them direct. And like,
yeah, exactly.
It makes a huge difference. Yeah, it makes, because, you know, they're not the person that walks in and asks the really awkward PR question like, the last game was shit. Is this one still? They're just like, what is this game? It looks cool. Yeah, there you go. That's the difference for like an outside perspective. And the more of that can get into games, the better all round of the whole, you know, getting away from it all being the same and kind of this, it's not specialist anymore. There's, you know, everyone is, I guess, a potential customer now. Whereas before, it wasn't. If you're talking SNES territory, it was very different to who was going to buy that game.
All right, well, final question before we wrap this up. What is your favourite cocktail that you serve at Loading Bar?
I got asked because I got asked to pick 3 the other day, and then I did the same thing I did with your games. Of the one I picked is my favourite thing we've done isn't the cocktail; it's the Metal Gear shot sculpture, where we got the 2,100 shot glasses and made. An artist drew me like Olden, younger Snake, and then we remade it in shot glasses.
That's impressive.
That's like my favourite thing we've done, just because it was a stupid idea that basically ripping off Art Attack. I spoke to my photographer and went, can we do this? And it came off the back of Konami said, can you do, Kojima's doing this battle talk, can you make a cocktail for it? And kind of brainstormed some, and it was like, this is going to be rubbish, because like, if we have to explain it to him, this is going to come across awful. And it was like, how could you do it in one drink? And then we were going to do like a whole set, and it didn't really capture kind of like how big Metal Gear was. I was a massive Metal Gear fanboy, so we had this idea to do, you know, build that sculpture, and it's a picture we then got printed and could give, because they were always saying like, you then present it to Kojima.
Yeah.
So it needed to be something I was like, he is not going to even understand if I'm there. And of describing 10 different cocktails and how they relate to his game. That's like not going to happen. Whereas this thing, we were like, you can get that instantly by like, it's a picture, and then cool, if you squint, oh sweet, shot glasses like, with drinks in them. So that was awesome to be able to do it and gift it to him. It's probably smashed up in a bin somewhere at Konami HQ now, but yeah, it was cool to be able to present that to him and do something a little bit different. We've always tried to, each time we get asked, not do the which makes it more awkward every time we get asked, because you remove something you could do. So that's like my favourite thing we've done. And then if not, it would be the GMT virus with the syringes, because it was the first time someone asked, like, it was Capcom emailed their like head of marketing, just happened to email me and was like, would you do one for us? And then luckily they were the first company we worked with, because they didn't care what it was. And I double checked, like, what can we use? What can we not use? Can we like take artwork? And they were like, just do what you want, send it to us and we'll check it's fine. Like, good. Whereas different from ones we've done over the years have been far more awkward for like doing it, but then you couldn't do that, or, oh, well, it sort of is, but don't use that artwork. And that's still the one, it fitted the game well. The fact the virus was a GMT virus worked brilliantly.
Yeah.
Like, it's still, we get weird press requests from, like, the last place was Maxim India, I think, ran it, and like, somewhere in Paris wanted it, and Like, it keeps popping up weirdly for reasons I can't understand. Is you'll just get an email from some journalist like, "Can we feature this picture in whatever article?" So that's the one that has, I guess, done the best. Whereas Metal Gear would be the one like I'll stick on the wall 50 years when I'm whinging about VR hologram pubs. I mean, like, it was never used to be this way.
I just looked at the Metal Gear image. That is really impressive. Like, that's very cool. I think what I like with that is, as you say, it's original, but it's the complexity that's got into it. Like, that's not something that you went, oh, we've got this cocktail and we kind of put this spin on it.
If they'd have asked us for, I don't know, like, because it was like, normally you get, say, oh, we need to serve it at a launch event, like that you could do, but it would be like, it would take hours and it'd be a different thing. Because it was like, oh, you can then give it to Kojima. It's like, I cannot stand in front of him with a pint glass with a bandana on it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Cigarette and be like, ta-da, here's like Metal Beer salad, which is what you'd end up with. And it's like, no, it has to be, we're like, if you're talking to, as a fan of like someone you're going to say is like an artist or whatever, it was like, it has to be better than that because I've got to actually stand and talk to him. Had it been like a quick project, then yeah, maybe you'd have got just a drink, but it was like, because it was to present it, we were like, no, we'll do it. And then Konami were obviously happy with that because they weren't really fussed what we did. And then I just said, like, is it cool if we do this? Because, like, here's the reasons I don't want to do. And I was like, it's something we haven't done before. So, like, there's more reason. And yeah, it's something we might do again or something else. I'd love to do one of those. Originally, we just made those, then gave them away to everyone that helped. But we really want to do some kind of event where we make one of those sculptures and then, you know, you have your GoPro above and that's everyone that arrives gets a shot for free, and you could have like
that'd be good.
Laser etch glasses, and that's something I think we've asked every company we've done stuff with since, like, you should do this, it would be cool.
It would be cool.
Video of it, you know, it getting deconstructed, or you reverse it and everyone builds this strange things. So it may come back. I don't know what game we would do or how many more shot glasses it would take.
But yeah, that's a great thing because you can, like, as you say, you can have it, people like constructing it because you play it in reverse, or just you do the classic video of you putting it together and then it getting taken apart. Like, both are great, simple ideas.
It works. And I like, obviously, done press events, you know, there's always some sort of drink given away. So we're like, at least, you know, it's going to cost you the same. At least this is more content, and it's like the magical world now of like Reddit and those sort of places. That kind of stuff is now. And you know, like the Easter eggs and like, oh, we spotted this, and that's where we have the indie devs that work in the bar, and it's interesting how they work. Where there's a lot of things you can put into your game that basically cost you nothing. That has that in mind. So like XCOM had with like renaming stuff, it's basically free to add that into your game. Yeah, and you get all this other content off the back of it that people come up with, and like Fallout's had it with the face editor of someone makes famous person, someone does this thing. Like it, you allow your like game or whatever to live like out, like just stretch way beyond just the gameplay mechanics. And
it's just those simple things that go viral easily, and then it's free promo for your game. It's just so easy. Right, well, it's been lovely talking to you, Jimmy. I've very much enjoyed our rather lengthy conversation tonight. Yes, I'm pretty sure I've put every problem that's wrong, you know, everything that's wrong with games, I think I've solved. Yeah, just all of it fixed. Wonderful. Well, I'll be honest, I haven't actually been to Loading, but I do need to come check it out. Yeah, we've had your entourage though. It's good. Like, people representing. Yes, you've definitely had people on the site. I did nearly go when you were it would have been last year after EGX when you were hosting something during EGX. Yes. Yeah. But I was staying like in where was it? Somewhere like the other side of London. And I just looked at it and I was like, I'm not going to get back to my hotel. Yeah, not going to happen. We're going to do that again this year. And the plan with stuff like that is that's where Stratford works far better. Yes, just because absolutely. It's similar size, but all on one floor. It has a garden, and like it'll fit that type of thing where it's good not to be huge all year long, because you just get, you know, one poor person has to sit in an empty bar. But having that little bit more space over here will be good for that type of party where it's the way our stuff tends to go, that like
either everyone comes or not many people come. So you want to, like, this one's a lot nicer, and it means people can get home and
Yeah.
make it a bit more accessible. So
That's it. Yeah. Oh no, I was staying in Kew at the time, so it was just like completely impractical. But as you say, it's much better being in Stratford. It's just so much easier to get to. It's a much better location, so it's great that you've got both now.
Yeah, it's cool, and that means we can still do the things we like to do, which is the events that on paper might be, and some like Marioki, where that was a game, like basically my operation is anything that's good at Game City, try and get like more regular, because that was one other thing with Marioki, that they do the video game karaoke, but it's like, why is it only once a year? And they're like, well, like we didn't really have somewhere to do it, and it was kind of niche in what it was, and then we could do it in the space and afford for it to build. Like, you can get things to build rather than this has to have 100 people or we never do it again because it costs us money. So it's looking for events like that, and that's where Stratford less so, but Dalston's still cool to have all that type of thing where someone wants to test something or has like a weird, stupid scheme. We're like, cool, just come and do it, and we don't charge them for that, and then they can get a cut, and it still gives people a place to test ideas, which is still the biggest problem of why you don't get more like tournaments or other bits, because to go to a random pub, that's going to cost you a ton of money up front. So it's been nice, and I'm always on the hunt for that type of thing where it's like a weird idea that will work perfectly for us. So like the Drink Along with an X-Files episode, or Game City had the text adventure where journalists were doing the text in real time. Something like that I'd love to get.
That'd be awesome.
Happening like once a month, where it's, again, just opening up to a bigger audience where there's more than, let's say, 100 people that get to try these things once, but it's making it doable for the people that run it.
Yeah.
For them to kind of sort it from scratch is a massive hassle. So,
well, make sure that if you're listening, make sure you go and check out the bars in Dalston and in Stratford. Have you got any social media stuff you want to pimp before we finish up?
Yeah, just either the website, so drinkrelaxplay.co.uk, or Twitter's the best place to pitch like ideas or drink requests or whatever else. If you want to moan at me that we don't have an N64, that's the place to do it. If enough people do, we would probably get one. So that's just at drinkrelaxplay.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today, Jimmy. It's been a pleasure. We will have even more of our Year According to series coming very soon. But for now, goodbye.
The Sixth Axis podcast.